Welcome to Frontlines. We will take a moment here in remembrance of the victims of the Armenian Genocide before we begin our discussions. Welcome, and today we join you on the 106th annual remembrance of the Armenian Genocide that took place in 1915. We are joined today by a guest who is not a newcomer to our program to discuss the meaning of today's events. It has been a historic day in a number of ways. In fact, it's been a historic day for a historic nation. And the work of hundreds and thousands of individuals across the United States, and of course of organizations and committees and communities bonding together over the course of decades to achieve what we achieved today as a community, as a nation. The statement by the President of the United States acknowledging, recognizing the events of 1915 as genocide is truly an historic moment for all Armenians, particularly of Armenian Americans, but it has ramifications throughout the globe. That, my friends, is our moment today, and it is opening a number of other issues that we're going to be discussing. At its core, we are at a moment of many crossroads. We know that it has been an absolutely tremendous year in a number of respects, both difficult and celebratory in some respects, with the recognition announcement that we received today. But we understand everything in context. We have to think about everything in context, and we have to assess everything in context. And with that, we'd like to welcome our viewers from across the United States and Canada, from across the Middle East and Europe, as well as in Armenia and Artsakh. I'd like to pass it on to Garo to introduce our guest and get our discussions going.
Thank you, Karnig, and good morning in Armenia and Artsakh. Good evening in the United States, and good day everywhere else. I want to join Karnig in, first of all, commemorating and sharing in all of the memories of the family members that many of us have lost, our ancestors, some of our grandfathers and great-grandfathers and grandmothers, if you will. I also want to take this moment to thank all those who have over the years fought hard to have their memories be kept alive and their sacrifices and their deaths not to be in vain. None better than to discuss what today means, because the Armenian Genocide was the greatest violation of human rights in modern history. So with that, and with the greatest news recently out of Washington, D.C., and all that it means, our guest today is our
I believe, Garo, your volume might not be working. I don't know if you can hear me. If we can, I think we'd like to have Arman, if you can join us at this moment, Arman, and address the issues of the day, the pressing issues of the day and the recent events.
Yes, thank you very much, Karnig, Garo, and I join you in expressing my thankfulness, first of all, to to all people who have been fighting for this very important step, for this very important purpose. Of course, I want to thank, first of all, express my thankfulness to you, to the Armenian Rights Watch Committee, to the co-founders, to Karnig, Kerkonian and Garo, Ghazarian, and to the Armenian Bar Association, to all very patriotic and important people who did a great job towards this goal, reaching this goal. And of course, my thankfulness to the Armenian National Committee and Armenian Assembly, which have been acting very actively throughout all these years. As you very rightly said, the Remembrance Day, April 24, is very symbolic, because 106 years ago, beginning on 24 of 1915, many people, millions of Armenians were massacred, were killed, raped, were forced to leave their homeland, and they just were left with nothing. And many of them were just tortured and killed. And of course, these are very, I would say, even cruel gross human rights violations, and violations that even were unprecedented, because after the Armenian genocide, the term genocide was created as we know, by Raphael Lemkin, and the convention was basically drafted based on the Armenian genocide. But I think I want to say, first of all, that we should make this statement to serve the very important purposes. First of all, as was rightly mentioned by the US President in his recognition statement, that this should have preventive effect, and one of the most important goals is to prevent any such kind of genocides in the future. And unfortunately, we are facing the same genocidal policy, I can say, right now in this region, in the South Caucasus, and especially this genocidal policy is being implemented. And I can say that our hatred towards Armenians and animosity is very deeply rooted in Azerbaijan and Turkey, and even I can say, and yesterday when I published this term, that Turkish-Azerbaijani genocidal policy. When we examined, when we studied the policy of authorities, let's say policy of authorities in Ottoman Empire, their ideology, their rhetorics, etc., and their actions, and we compare it with the current policy, if we take Azerbaijan, then basically there's so many similarities that one gets clear impression that these are the same countries, and this is the same, exactly the same policy based on the same principles. And even when we analyze the results of the very recent war, results of the April war of 2016, they're so close to each other, and even I can say that they're the same. And that is why sometimes maybe the facts are different, situation is different, but the effects, the consequences on the human rights, and the way that by which they're committed, these are exactly the same policies. And we have to, I think, to look at this, all of this, as a very important step to prevent future genocide and eliminate current genocidal policies in this region. And of course, we have to build on it, on this statement. Otherwise, it will stay like a historic fact. But we have to build on it and to use it, as you very rightly said, for our to secure the interests of our nation, of our country, and of course to establish a real security and human rights protection system here.
Arman, I think that what you just raised about the similarities of the actual policies that are implemented by the Azerbaijani government with the assistance of Turkey, especially in the 2020 war, I think I'm reminded of a statement by Erdogan himself, if I'm not mistaken, where he says, "One nation, two states." And with that statement come responsibilities and comes attribution. And it's very telling that the studies that your office has done regarding these policies and the similarities with respect to the policies that were carried out by Turkey during the genocide and even thereafter, in terms of oppression of the Armenian population. I think we have a very strong and compelling argument to say that the idea of genocide recognition, at least one of the formative elements of it, is to prevent it from happening again. And here, often I think we often think about that in the context of it happening again to some other people, right? And in this particular instance, we have seen it happen repeatedly throughout history. And if you don't mind indulging me, Arman, I think very interesting and in-depth publications from your office have traced some of the incidents and events that have taken place since the genocide up until the Artsakh war. Would you mind giving us basically just fill in the blanks for us about how, whether it's Sumgait, Baku, Kirovabad, about how these policies have manifested themselves?
Well, there are several components, I would say. First, when we have our office, as you very rightly mentioned, we have published, we have made many publications, but always we try to highlight the logic, the similarities, let's say, between different events, actions, and even speeches. And I can say that, first of all, when we analyze official rhetorics, because these are the main lines which give you the possibility to understand the real intention. So that is why I'm always saying that we have to look into the real intention of these countries. And apparently, both in all, as you very rightly said, repeatedly, we had the same policy, because when we analyze the Ottoman Empire, the period of the Ottoman Empire, when we analyze the period of the beginning of 20th century, 1918, etc., and massacres in Baku, in Sumgait, in Artsakh, in Shushi, for example, in 1918, and then later the massacre started, Sumgait in 1987, and massacre started then at that period. Then also we had repeatedly the same policies for example, in 2016, in 2020, but it also especially restarted in Azerbaijan in 2003, when the current president of Azerbaijan came to power. And I can even say that if we compare the rhetorics now, even we have deepening of these policies. And I started to call it even fascism, because what he does, he presents kind of the advantages of the Azerbaijani nation or Armenian nation, all the time makes these comparisons, and then, but at the expense of humiliating, like he does, has the clear purpose to humiliate, to the degrading treatment, etc., of the Armenian nation. And by this, of course, he incites hatred and animosity. The second thing, which is, I think, a very important component, is the practical implementation of these policies, in practice. When we analyze and study the torture, atrocities, the way that they have been committing this, these are literally the same. And there is another very important thing. Words and speeches of for example, if we take Azerbaijan and we analyze the 2016 war, let's say 2020, soldiers, Azerbaijani armed forces, their soldiers, when torturing Armenians, when torturing Armenian military servicemen or civilians even, killing them, beheading them, they are using the same, they do everything with the same words and inspiration, as they take these words from the Azerbaijani president, and these words, these speeches are kind of driving force. And our office analysis clearly showed this. And I have to say that that is why I'm saying that these war crimes and this genocidal policy, the perpetrators and those who are committing should be punished as, and seeing them as parts of a single policy, which is very important. Then we see clear similarities between the Armenian genocide and the further policies. And even when sometimes, you know, we have also sometimes the policies that are being expressed by Turkish authorities. The very vivid example is, and the recent example, is the 2020 December 10 speech of the president of Turkey, who compared the Artsakh war, 2020 war, with the Armenian genocide. And he compared, he said, he compared with the souls, let's say, those who were killed, who died during this war from the Azerbaijani side. He compared with the Turkish, with Armenian perpetrators of the Armenian genocide in Turkey, in Ottoman Empire, and said that their souls are kind of in heaven, etc. So this is probably in general terms the answer to your question, bringing it kind of trying to show exactly the same policy we have at the moment, even in a very highly rooted, let's say, form, which is now even is in a form of fascism, and it is very clear.
Arman, let me ask you this question. Can you hear me first? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I view the President of the United States unequivocal declaration acknowledging and declaring the events of 1915 and the years that followed as genocide, a real turning point. I view it as a turning point because I view it today as an American Armenian. I am proud to be an American who is an Armenian, because that declaration essentially told the world America is back. America is back as the beacon of human rights around the world, as the protector, and no longer will the United States of America be silent when its NATO ally, Turkey, has gone on for decades exerting a gag rule, shutting up prior presidents. And here it is, the 46th president of the United States, on day 95 in his office, short of the 100-day symbolic period that we measure presidents here in the US, what they've done in the first 100 days. He did what he said he would do. As we say in Armenian, asets u arets. You are the human rights defender for all Armenians, as far as I'm concerned, with your new colleague now in Artsakh, Stepanyan, who's doing wonderful work, following in the footsteps of Artak Beklarian, and prior to that, Ruben Melikian. But here you are, fighting the fight on many, many levels. What does it mean to you, keeping in mind that you have been the subject of many attacks by Azerbaijani media and government for calling out many of the atrocities that they've done? What does it mean to you, and how do you view today's White House's unequivocal declaration of the Armenian genocide?
Well, first and foremost, as I just want to repeat it because this is really very important. This is a very real, really very important statement. That this we have to build on it. We have to make this statement to serve interests of prevention of genocidal policies here, because and we should not leave this statement to be as kind of an end in itself. So we reach the goal and this is it. So we have to continue, because if we do not continue working towards this direction, then there is a very this policy will there is a danger that this policy will be eventually implemented, and we saw in Artsakh already. And you know, we have to take into account very clearly not only speeches, rhetorics, and of current Azerbaijan, but also their propaganda. That what they do, they present first of all, they falsified and distort all historic facts, which was done also by Turkish authorities, and now they are being continued by Azerbaijani authorities. That as if sometimes even they their official in their official publications, policies, it is mentioned that current Armenia is Western Azerbaijan, that Armenia is created on the ancient lands on the Azerbaijan. This was, by the way, mentioned also officially by the president of Azerbaijan. And with this, they not only raise territorial kind of issues, problems, or claims, and threats, but also he speaks with open threats related to the population, entire population of Armenia and Artsakh, with open threats. And the very recent speech was the speech about, was this kind of interview given to the main Azerbaijani television related to the Zangezur and to all other, let's say, related to this thing issues. What I want also to say that, we have to bring very clearly this information, these details, to the outside, to the world, to the worldwide community, so to say, to the outside world, because as I understand, the current purpose of Azerbaijani authorities is to create kind of stereotypes around all these issues, Armenian issue, Artsakh war, etc., trying to present that everything now is perfect, that everything is over, and they are now building peace. But I have to say that the same genocidal policy is being continued, and we have to present it because they try to kind of form these stereotypes. And the important thing not to allow this misinformation to be spread among international organizations. As, by the way, it was done. I think the main guarantee or the safeguard for reaching this very important goal, I mean, yesterday's recognition by the US president, was the constant, all the time, every minute work by presenting the real information, truth to the authorities, to the right people. I think the same should be done now. The same should be done in the future, because the purpose of Azerbaijan to hide everything and try to present it as if they are they're restoring justice and historic rights of some rights, but everything at the expense of one nation. As the human rights defender of Armenia, as a human rights person, I highly value this very important thing, that peace is not at the expense of one side. And peace is a very high value for the Armenian nation, but it should not be, we cannot tolerate that this peace is at the expense of our interests, at the expense of our lives, of the violation of our rights.
Arman, sorry, Karnig, a quick follow-up to
Sure.
that. Really is it's the domain of both of you. You both are very well versed in international law, so perhaps you can discuss, and I'll be a fly on the Zoom here, about the meaning of this as it relates to Armenia politically, its influence in Europe, and given the context of the foreign ministry of Turkey issuing its defiant denial and insulting comments that came out from the ministry today, and the one glaring matter to me that, as it comes to Armenian genocide, Turkey cannot divide and conquer now the East and the West. And by that, I mean Russia and the US, since they are now countries that at the highest level have acknowledged the genocide. Really, it's a discussion for you and Karnig, Armanjan. So please, Karnig, pick it up from what I've left. I probably didn't articulate it as well as
no. I think I know what you're saying, and I feel as if that question is multidimensional, and I think we should probably just break it down into a couple of points. And I want to start with something you just mentioned, Garo, is that of all the differences between Russia and the United States, they agree on one thing today. They agree that the Armenian genocide is a fact. Both countries do. And that is a very powerful message in and of itself, I think, globally, that despite a world of differences, and we know that those things play out in Europe and many other places, both Russia and the United States today, on April 24th, 2021, find common ground on a very strategic point, and that is in a strategic area of the world, that the Armenian genocide was real. It was a real genocide. It should be called for what it is. And I think that premise, I think, is interesting from a legal standpoint, because it flows into something else. When you say international law in terms of public international law, where we deal with where the Armenian population of the world is at greatest risk. The Armenian population at greatest risk today is sitting in Stepanakert and other parts of Artsakh. We know that. That is where the Armenian population is of greatest risk. And what we have today is a very different, perhaps from a diplomatic standpoint, a very different reality, in that the three OSCE chairs, the co-chairs of the OSCE Minsk process that deal with the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, right? Every one of them, Russia, the United States, and France, now recognize the genocide. And that being said, and I wanted to get Arman's thoughts on this, I think it's very, very hard for the final settlement, final status discussions on Nagorno-Karabakh to be seen through any other prism than the prism of the fact that Turkey, and under the one nation, two state process that we saw flourish in 2020, its brother state, Azerbaijan, have engaged and continue to engage in genocidal practices against the Armenian population. I think it's very hard for the OSCE and international observers to think about a solution, a final status discussion regarding Artsakh without taking the genocide into consideration. I want to get Arman, your thoughts on that, as to whether that plays, perhaps that takes the human rights element to the diplomatic level and says that we cannot think about this without without considering the backdrop of the reality of the Armenian genocide. What are your thoughts, Arman?
Karnig, I fully agree with you that this is a very important component, though I have to say that your question requires also some diplomatic or political discussion. I will, of course, focus on human rights component, but I have to say that there is also a very famous international term. It is called human rights diplomacy. So human rights do play a role, and human rights diplomacy means that human rights values, human rights dedication should not be ignored, and in all policies that have any component related to human rights, to human being, they should be considered. And definitely human rights institutions have here a crucial role. But first and foremost, I want to express my gratitude, of course, to the Russian government, to the Russian president, Russian parliament, for recognizing the Armenian genocide, these massacres as genocide, and which was very important in the history of our nation. By the same principle, I want to express my gratitude to the French government, to the French president, to the French parliament, to the people of France, to the people of Russia, and and to our communities, by the way, Armenian communities and diaspora, both in Russia and France, which also play their role, and they continue to work towards these very important purposes. So now what we have, very important theory, very important concept and idea. All co-chairs of the Minsk group recognized the Armenian genocide, these massacres as Armenian genocide, and it means that they recognized also the policies of these countries as genocidal towards the Armenian people. You know, these millions of people were died, were killed, were assassinated only based on the fact that they're Armenians, only on ethnic ground. By the way, I have to say that Azerbaijan currently implements also policy of hatred, not only on the ground, on the ethnic ground, but also religious. Very important. They try, I have to say that I know that they try kind of to hide it, or it is not the main part of their policy, but I have to say that this is in the real essence of their policies. So definitely we have, that is why I'm saying we have to present all this information, the currently happening, taking place right now in this region, after the war, before the war, and right now currently, to present to these countries. And I think this should serve from human rights standpoint, as a very important factor to prove that Armenians cannot live in one state, you know, within Azerbaijan, let's say. It is not possible because, you know, the president of Azerbaijan several times after the war very proudly said, that a whole generation was grown up in Azerbaijan, which is with feeling of hatred towards the enemy, and they still continue. The vivid example is the so-called Trophy Park in Baku, which is also very widely open for children, you know, and it means that they're growing up another generation, which means that they will be filled with the same feeling of hatred. And definitely this is done already for, I don't know, for decades, for another 100 years, especially given the cruelties, given the cruel consequences of this war. That is why it is, yes, it is a very important component, and I think that it should be used, the fact of the recognition of the Armenian genocide by all three co-chair countries, because you know what I think very important, to show that the same policy continues also nowadays. This is the very important thing. The same policy by which they recognize the Armenian genocide and committed in the Ottoman Empire, the same policy is being implemented right now. And I think that that is why I always pay attention to all speeches of the president of Azerbaijan, to all the developments, and we have even a specialist, we have assistants, specialists who help us from Yerevan State University, from the Oriental Studies faculties, who help us always to translate very accurately all the words, the meanings and the context of the speeches of the president of Azerbaijan and authorities of Azerbaijan, and then to present it to the outside world, not to allow them to distort the historic facts and not to allow to brainwash in a very negative sense the outside world that currently there is a different policy. No, the policy is the same.
You know, I think that's a great point, Arman Jan, and I think to follow up on that, Garo, and the furtherance of answering your question, I think that there's, you know, I was reflecting on this when I was reading the essentially a repeated denial statement by Turkey, and what we see now is an increasing isolation of Turkey on this point. Right. I mean, this is a very significant role, I think, and it plays, when I say isolation of Turkey, on the revisionist historical game that they were playing. This takes, you know, this is the big brother NATO country telling the little brother NATO country that, you know, you're wrong on this point. You're wrong on this point for real. We all know it. The charade is over. And I think that it has real consequences, perhaps in even pending litigation matters in various courts. Of course, when people talk about what does this mean, you know, there's immediate discussion of, you know, whether reparations or this or that. I think that what we have to do is realize that every case is brought within a jurisdiction and there are rules that apply within a jurisdiction. But I think that it's really important on establishing something which we know in the civil context and the criminal context as well, and that is the idea of a pattern of conduct. We now have really essentially a global agreement, which is really kind of crossing the divide, and the aspect, as Arman was saying, of connecting the dots on current matters that are pending, from cultural heritage issues to POWs, to the treatment of POWs, to issues regarding as Aliyev had said, the idea of coexistence, right? I think all of these points are put into a really different context. They are looked through a different light, and I think that that, if you will, backdrop has changed. And I think that there will be various legal ramifications to that in the international law realm, as well as through various domestic courts and regional courts. But those will come through various specific cases. And I think that this serves a very strong evidentiary basis where there's very little disagreement, if you will, from serious minds, because I think what Biden's statement says is that the charade is over. I think that's what the statement says more than anything else, because as was reflected by a number of political commentators, the historians of the world, the real historians of the world, have known what the Armenian genocide was and is. I think right now is that the political charade is over, and which would lead into the fact that it cannot be a tenable legal argument to say that there is dispute on this. And I think how that's going to play out in the courts is to be seen. But I think that what we're looking at is evidence of pattern of conduct, that the specific instances that Arman's raising deal exactly in that discourse in terms of the pattern of conduct. We're seeing connections, we're seeing it one link to another. And I have to say, I think that just the physical image of Erdogan in Baku celebrating the victory of the war, sitting next to Aliyev, speaking of two states, one nation, now means something very different in a lot of ways. And it's no surprise to me that a phone call happened between Turkey and Azerbaijan after the statement. Turkey didn't pick up the phone and call Tajikistan. And there's a reason why it called Azerbaijan. And I think that should not be lost on anybody. I think they realize that, their hands are caught in the cookie jar, and their charade of not only genocide denial, but of trying to cast Armenians as Nazis, trying to cast Armenians as the protagonists in this grim world of hatred, and as opposed to the victims of that, I think has run its course. And like Arman said, our work is not done. And I commend, and we should continue commending and supporting the organizations that have brought about this result through their efforts, and the communities and the individuals that have, because building on this, and I see some comments on our live stream right now where it is about building, and I think Arman raised that point right at the beginning, and maybe we can explore that a little bit. And in fact, I want to get Garo your thoughts on what that means to build behind this. How does one build on this?
One builds on this, and let me tell you, it's just beginning to sink in for me. President Biden's statement. I've had a busy day, as many of us have. And when I took a moment visiting my 90-year-old father and my 88-year-old mother and discussing with them what occurred today, the brief exchange made me realize that I was discussing something that was a new reality. And so I went back and I read President Biden's White House release, and something resonated with me more and more because I read it several times. This one passage. The passage said, "Today, as we mourn what was lost, let us also turn our eyes to the future, toward the world that we wish to build for our children. A world unstained by the daily evils of bigotry and intolerance." I put in parentheses Azerbaijan and Turkey, where human rights are respected. I put in parentheses where human rights were not respected in Artsakh during the 44-day war. And where all people are able to pursue their lives in dignity and security. Again, check. I put Artsakh and I put the Sunik in Zangezur and all of the regions of Armenia that to this day, Azerbaijan is threatening, and Arman, you're calling them out on When the president went on and said, let us renew our shared resolve to prevent future atrocities from occurring anywhere in the world, it makes me think, if it wasn't the 46th president, if it was the 45th, 44th, 43rd, would we have had the Artsakh war? And let us pursue healing and reconciliation for all the people of the world. I view that as Turkey, come to your senses. If not, then our work ahead, Karnig, here's our work ahead. We pressure for every country that has any business dealings with Turkey to stop dealing with Turkey. Divest Turkey, not just as California Armenians exercise their best efforts with Sacramento, not just the US Armenians, but the Armenians of the world with their respective governments. And we start with Israel, for crying out loud, a country that is built on the survivors of the Holocaust to this day, is in bed with genocide perpetrators and continuation of genocide advocates in Baku and in Istanbul, or rather Ankara, and perhaps to some extent in Istanbul as well. So we start by pressing the go button, and we continue. When we say Baykar, that's just not some saying. Our work is real. And when I say our work, I mean the work of our nation, the work of the young people that I saw today in the streets of Los Angeles, whether it was in front of the Turkish consulate or whether it was in Little Armenia in Hollywood, whether it was in the cold early morning of Chicago or in Philadelphia or elsewhere, Europe. We start, we continue.
If I may say here something, add something. Look, as Karnig very rightly said, the comparison, I also always make these comparisons and refer to the military event that took place on December 10, 2020 in Baku, when the Turkish president participated, and not only because of these expressions of one state, etc., two states, one nation, but because he was comparing the results of the war and the souls, as he was saying, with the Armenian genocide, with this war, with Azerbaijani. So it means everything is the same. And you know, the president of Azerbaijan keeps blaming our country, keeps saying that Armenian authorities or Armenia is a fascist state, is a Nazi state, etc. But I have to say that this is wrong. This is distortion of the reality, because they are the fascists. They are implementing this fascism, and I have to say this is their policy. And that is why I started starting from this war, we started to show to the world with exact even citations from their speech. Even I was even thinking to make comparisons with fascists of the beginning of 20th century and Second World War, and now to say that logic basically is the same. And that is why, and you will never find an Armenian authorities of Armenia, of independent Armenia, of course, from Soviet Union, that could speak about the nation of Azerbaijan. Real people, not authorities, people of Azerbaijan could spread hatred or could spread animosity. No, there has been no such policy in Armenia, never ever. That is why, but the whole propaganda machine of Azerbaijan tries to present that as if this is this country, and that is why they use it as an umbrella, you know, for their atrocities, for all the cruelties. And I have to say that peace building is very important. It's very important, really, because when I have meetings with my international partners, they always, and there is also some discourse, public discourse in our society. So, well, then how are we going to live in this region? This is not a house, you know, and these are not our neighbors that we could sell, you know, sell out our house and move to another building. Mm-hmm. This is our region. This is our homeland. Now, what is going to happen with this, with the peace and solidarity? I have to say that we have also to show to the worldwide community, to the civilized world, that peace building from Azerbaijan always was kind of an umbrella, a reason, but in reality, they have been always implementing their genocidal policies. They were using this only for international community to show as if these are peace builders, etc. Being in the capacity of the human rights defender of this country, several times I participated in a peace building measures being initiated either by Azerbaijan or with intermediation of international organization. And I very clearly remember the peace building, so-called track 2 peace building. For our just viewers to explain that this is peace building kind of ice-breaking measures between civil societies, between experts, journalists, etc. And the very important, famous 2 examples of the Baku platform, which was in 2016, and in 2018 there was another platform which was called Baku-Tbilisi platform. And both of them were initiated by Azerbaijan. Both of them were made up of experts, by the way, also Armenians, Azerbaijanis, but when we studied their real intentions, their views, they were Armenian haters. And this was very apparent because in parallel in 2016, we had the April War, which started the first day of the April War with atrocities, cutting the ear of our civilians, of our elderly people. And and beheading our soldiers. That is why this is also very important. What Azerbaijani authorities do, they try to present to they mobilize all the resources, present to the world as if they are kind of peace builders, they are seeking for peace, and blame our country, leave our country under the burden of taking the responsibility for peace. But I have to say that peace cannot be one-sided at the expense of violation of our nation's rights, of our people's rights. And my concept or this idea is not a nationalistic idea. This is the idea to protect everyone who lives in Armenia. We have also national minorities, and Armenian people, we have been always living in peace and solidarity with other nations. We have Yazidis, we have Assyrians, we have Russians, Ukrainians, etc. And with all of them, they're our brothers and sisters. And similarly, Armenians in other countries, like you in the US, you are the national minority in this sense, but there have been never a problem, right? There has been never a problem. The same goes for Russia, the same goes for France, etc. That is why this component should be presented to the world. And one small addition, Karnig, as you very rightly said, we have to present the whole composition of all components because Armenian genocide was not about only killing people. It was an entire nation was dispossessed of its educational, cultural, economic property, deprived of all possibilities of historical, of the roots of history, which is very important. And because now what Azerbaijani authorities also do, they are rewriting of the history, which is very important to highlight. And yes, again, I want to bring this and to connect this to your idea about this 3-country recognition, that all 3 countries recognized means co-chairs of the Minsk group recognize the Armenian genocide, because exactly the same policy with the same components, only in a different century, is being implemented by Azerbaijan with very high assistance of Turkey, sometimes directly by Turkey, of course.
I think those points ring very, very true, Arman Can, and I think that I'm reflecting on a statement that was made, and I'll mention who it was a couple of years ago, but I think we've come a long way as a nation in identifying around this human rights issue, one of the core elements that binds us together. When I say us, I mean Artsakh, the diaspora, and Armenia proper. That, and I'm going to borrow some words from Garo, from a recent statement he made. Yesterday's Hajin is today's Hadrut. Yesterday's Sis is today's Shushi. And the statement that I'm remembering is a statement that the Deputy Foreign Minister of Artsakh, Armenian Alexanian, stated at USC during a talk at USC, explaining exactly how the struggle of Artsakh today is similar to the struggle of our people 100 years ago. That those struggles that we are having against the Turk, as the Azerbaijanis are called in local parlance, is no different than the struggles that were happening in all of the Ottoman Empire at that time. Our histories are tied together, and this is unfortunately a very powerful theme. Unfortunate because it is not a happy theme, but it is a theme that is a call to action for us. That we sit today in a place where there are 150,000, 120, 130, 150,000 Armenians that are living, as Arman Tatoyan's work over the last few months have shown, meters from the barrel of a Turkish gun. That's where they're living today. And I want to ask you a question, Arman-jan, about specifically on this theme. Clearly, it has evoked, and it will continue to evoke over time, very important feelings individually, within families, within communities, within the nation, generally. But I want to ask you, how do we in the diaspora assist now in what is our common mission? There have been arguments in the past that the genocide recognition issue is a diaspora issue, and it's not a republic issue, it's not an Artsakh issue, it's not this, it's not that. Clearly, what your work has shown, Arman-jan, is the fact that these issues are of the Armenian nation. It is an Armenian national issue. We find our common ground in advocating these human rights themes and parameters, and in fact, it is for the good of humanity that we do it. But at the very basic, it is also for the good of our own skin that we advocate for this. So I want to ask you, with the recognition of Europe, the recognition of Russia, the recognition of a number of countries in the Middle East, and now the recognition today formally by the President of the United States. As we turn the page, if you will, to the building side, how do we assist in the diaspora in particular? How do we assist in the building of the human rights initiative of the Armenian people? What is the work that you would like to see from our organizations, from our people, from our communities, from our individuals in building on top of what is now a growing consensus that the Armenians are on the wrong side of the barrel of a gun when it comes to a Turkish soldier, whether it's a Turkish soldier or Azerbaijani soldier? How do we build on those themes? What does your office, what does your institution seek to hear or be able to, what does it recommend? Let's put it that way, to try to build on these initiatives, which you so aptly have not only identified, but clearly understand.
Well, as you were rightly mentioned, that this is, of course, not a diasporan issue. This is a pan-Armenian issue. And the current situation clearly shows this. The recent war clearly showed this, that because the same policy, as we discussed already, the same policy is being implemented now. And yes, I appreciate powerful words of Garo Ghazarian, who said that, yes, who compared cities of Artsakh with cities, towns, and communities of Western Armenia, or let's say Armenian cities and communities in the Ottoman Empire, let's say. And I very much agree that we have already to turn to page on building already on this statement. And I have to say that we have to bring to the worldwide community, to US, for example, it should be already a new subject of work a renewed subject of work, presenting the current challenges, the current situation. I will bring an example of the Republic of Armenia and the situation related to our borders. As you very rightly mentioned, Karnig, that in our bordering communities, people live in very close distance with Azerbaijani soldiers. Their locations are not only in the immediate vicinity of our villages, which is of course a clear danger to their lives, health, physical, psychological integrity of our people, but also they have their locations on the roads that are connecting our civilian communities. If you go from Goris to Vorotan and Shurnukh, then you go from Kapan to Chakaten to Tsav, Shikahokh, Sarashen, Nerkinhand, etc., other villages. One may easily observe Azerbaijani signs, Azerbaijani flags, which they install with one very clear purpose: to intimidate our people, to put the psychological pressure, and of course to use this as a reason to locate there Azerbaijani soldiers, Azerbaijani border guards, armed people. And I have to say that now, as you know, I'm pushing, and we are now finalizing, but I'm pushing the concept forward to creation of a security zone. Why I do this? Because of the existence of Azerbaijani soldiers, signs, flags at the borders of Armenia, which is, by the way, in gross violation of international law, because their presence is illegal, illegitimate, and does not have any legal ground. They violated, because of this presence, rights of social economic rights of our people are grossly violated. Rights of our people to life, to health, etc., are in real danger. And these soldiers, by the way, are soldiers of the president of Azerbaijan. He is their chief commander, right? Who is all the time threatening Armenia, who speaks about our nation with open threats. And we have to show now to the world that we have this existential threat now, even for our bordering population. I'm not talking even for Artsakh, of course, because I just brought this example for Armenia, given also my specificity of my mandate. And I think that we have now to present to the world and to work very hard to present all these violations. Azerbaijan, again, tries, and they do everything in cooperation with Turkey, assistance with Turkey, to show to the world that everything is perfect. There are no issues, and everyone in this region already is happy, and I don't know, is in happiness. But I have to say that this is, of course, wrong, and we have to show to the real situation. Otherwise, again, they will distort all the facts. And we have also, unfortunately, we have also the same, but even in a worse, let's say, manner, the existential issues also in Artsakh. But just the example of Armenia shows that it is not possible, and a security zone around Syunik should be created, given also the fact that we have even shootings in the vicinity. So one day, even at some point, I published a video evidence, because Azerbaijanis, even to Russians, they were lying, according to my information, saying that the shootings that take place, that you hear, are from Armenians, that Armenians who are located next to us, they open fire, and then they blame us for opening fire. But when we publish the video, I have to say that, of course, our border guards from Russian border guards, according to my information, they learned about this, that what is happening there, and consequently there was the respective reaction. So this is, again, bringing it to the new page. I think that we have to start working very heavily the same issues. Otherwise, the problem is that, or the unfortunate thing, development may be also continuation of or implementation of this genocide policy in practice here in Armenia, not only in Artsakh.
Karnig, if I may, if I may, real quickly, Arman, you spoke about our civilians at the border villages in Armenia living in fear or threat to their security. And in fact, you have repeatedly issued statements derived from fact-finding missions that you've been on. And we know that you just went on one such fact-finding mission with the president of the Republic of Armenia, which I think lasted 3 days earlier in the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Could you tell us if that fact-finding mission revealed any additional information that can possibly our president can pursue diplomatically, perhaps, given your mandate that is limited to just the human rights perspective? Was it an informative trip for the president, in your opinion?
Thank you, Garo, for raising this issue. As you rightly mentioned, and as you know, I have been visiting our Sunni region several times. But you know, I realized sometimes at some point I realized when we came to the idea and we discussed with you, Karnig and Garo, this issue a lot from especially legal standpoint, and I very appreciate your role because your advice helped me a lot to study international experience, to develop the details of this concept. So I came to an idea that a security zone should be created around Sunni. But since this concept has a number of political components, this is not a pure human rights issue. Yes, it is based on human rights components, I have to say. In the center of this concept is a human being, is a person, and protection, the need for the protection of this person. But in order to push it forward effectively, we need not only human rights institutions, but also some political. And I had, before this trip, several discussions with the president of the country. And I have to say that I highly appreciate his statement during one of our meetings when he stated that there is an uncertainty at the border related to the borders of Armenia because it is apparent there has been no demarcation or limitation with Azerbaijan. By the way, never ever. Between Armenia and Azerbaijan, there has been never ever demarcation and limitation, delimitation. So, and then we agreed with the president that it would be good to have a joint visit as two constitutional institutions and as heads of two constitutional institutions, because Armenia's Human Rights Defender is an independent institution. We can have our own fact finding, and then, but the president can use his possibilities, his ties, possibilities in international organizations with other countries to push this idea forward. And for me, an important also thing is that the president of the country could see personally, directly, what is happening there on the ground. And of course, our visit was revealed problems that I was identifying, problems that we identified during our fact-finding, and I have to say that some, in many cases, they got worse, given also the seasonal works for agricultural works, etc., because many people were deprived of their pastures, they were deprived of their lands, and now apparently there's a huge problem related to this issue because they just are deprived of their incomes for their families, which creates difficulties and the problems. And I have to say that we again revealed cases when lands of people, private lands, not only community lands, but lands of private people who had their cadastral documentation, now physically are not in the territory of the Republic of Armenia. I mean, territory not under our control, let's say, physically. These are the problems. Now, what we do, this is a very delicate issue, and we cannot just make a statement or send some assessment to international organization, general one. That is why now our office is summarizing our trip. Even we are trying now to count the number of locations of Azerbaijan, is the flags, etc., exact locations, because we have even places. Can you imagine, for example, the village near Kinhan, location of Azerbaijanis is even less than 500 meters away from school, which is an operational school. And this is a real problem. And my first submission was sent to international organizations on at the beginning of late January. I received already several reactions from very high levels, but now we want to present this concrete model, let's say, and I very much hope, we have to work very hard, really very hard. The important thing is to show the problem to international organizations. And one more, okay, maybe then when we sum up with this discussion, then I would like to say some words about the public discourse here, which I have some concerns with it.
I wanted to, when you were talking about the villages with the farms, under Azerbaijani control and the homes here, and I know that Garo's nodding because we have spoken of these issues significantly in various litigation and other matters. These stories are the stories of our ancestors that we are honoring today, whose memory we're honoring today. These are the same stories. These are the same stories, geographically perhaps distant, but not that distant, and also players that, frankly, are the same players by their own admission. They're the same players. And I think that this is where we have to start realizing that the struggles that are happening in Sunik today, whether your family is from Urfa or from Kesab or from Dikranagert or wherever, these struggles are the struggles in some significant ways that our own ancestors have gone through. When I say in terms of diasporan Armenians, and of course a lot of Armenians that live in Armenia that have roots in Western Armenia, we have to realize that that's the case. If somebody told you today that there are 100,000 Armenians in Gars surrounded by Turkish soldiers, we'd be up in arms. We need to be up in arms about what's happening in Artsakh today, because that is exactly what's happening in Artsakh today. If somebody would say that today there's an Armenian, whose lands have been taken, when we had the incursions of the Turkish military into Kesab, we were up in arms. We need to remain up in arms about what's happening on the border in Sunik. I think that, and we try to do a good job of circulating Arman's statements and reports and policy points. I think it's really, really imperative in this particular moment, right now, that our communities, our leadership of our communities, read and follow and try to implement the themes that Arman Tatoyan speaks of in these reports, in these papers, and try to really figure out the mechanisms by which we can impose and impress the global community to the extent that we can, through media, through global reach out to various institutions and otherwise, in various different disciplines, not just through the law or not just through politics, but through culture, through education, and through other means. We need to be unified in these themes to solve today's problems as well. That is something we owe to our ancestors, is to solve today's problems so that our children do not have to be dealing with these types of issues 2 or 3 generations from now. I don't have a question there, Garo. I just felt like when I was listening to Arman's talk about what is happening on the border towns of Sunik, as we've heard on a number of times, and to hear that it's getting worse, I couldn't help but remember the stories, even, Garo, of your family in the Kesab border in '39, how what happened with your family, and hundreds, and if not thousands, of other families throughout the Armenian nation. And we're seeing it happen again. Not only are the themes there, not only is the ethnic cleansing a undercurrent, but we're also seeing the reactions and the real manifestations or ramifications on actual people today, and I just wanted to highlight that.
Karnig, I'm gonna turn it over to Arman and maybe because we can talk for hours and hours, I want to turn it over to Arman. He can he could say his wrap-up remarks. You could say your wrap-up remarks, and I'll say my closing remarks. But I will just say this for now. Keep both of you and our audience ought to keep in mind. When you talk about Karnig, I know there are many Western Armenians who went to Armenia, so-called Eastern Armenia, current proper Armenia. They live in Gyumri. Their children are born in different places in Armenia. There's even Kesapsis there, Musalersis rather, from the genocide era. But what is very, very painful is that when I grew up in Beirut and heard the stories that where they used to live, these were genocide survivors, where they used to live, but now they live here. Well, today we have people living in different cities, in Goris, in Gyumri, in Yerevan, and in the suburbs, who used to live in Shushi, who used to live in Hadrut. I get a lot of people contacting me from over there, from social media and different channels. And they are heart-wrenching stories. And they are really a repeat of every story that every Armenian in the diaspora has heard and has lived with. And now every Armenian in Armenia, every Armenian from Artsakh, either is going through it or knows someone that's going through it. Yes, we are a pan-Armenian issue driving, imperative calling moment in our history. Arman?
Yes, I agree with this very important conceptual assertion, because this is a real concept, idea that we have to be guided by. What I wanted to say there is that unfortunately, silence of international community during the war very largely contributed to the cruel consequences of this war. And this was very largely because of silence of international worldwide community, human rights organizations. And this was the problem, that the recent Artsakh war was so much politicized. And human rights issues, consequences, beheadings, killings, everything was kind of under the shadow of political reasons and political developments, and kind of political reasons prevailed, unfortunately, over human rights, which is a problem. And this was the purpose of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has been always doing everything to isolate Artsakh, to isolate Armenians generally from the outside world. And we can easily remember instigation of criminal cases, criminal prosecutions, visits of journalists, having so-called blacklists, which was purely based on, and is purely based on, hatred, animosity towards Armenians, and on the Armenophobia principles and state-sponsored Armenophobia. Even we have European Court of Human Rights judgments, and this is very exclusive, that the International Court recognized in several judgments that in Azerbaijan, crimes against Armenians are ethnically motivated. And moreover, criminals are encouraged, and there is a glorification that these people are encouraged by not only by the authorities, but unfortunately culture figures, sport figures, etc. And that is why the international, the eye of the international community, and of course yesterday's recognition is a part of that, is very important also for prevention purposes, and not to allow in the future to happen these kind of things, and to reveal the real essence of the real policy of Azerbaijan of isolation and this genocidal policy. So having said this, I want to express my deep thankfulness, my sincere thankfulness to the Armenian Bar Association, and first of all to you, to the Armenian Rights Watch Committee, to the co-founders, because during the whole, throughout the whole period of the war and after the war, not after the war, but after hostilities, because I think that we are still in a war, unfortunately. You have been doing a great job, not only raising awareness of our compatriots on these very important issues and trying to create a very important channel of dialogue, of discussion with the outside world and bringing to the attention of our compatriots, but also to have different discussions on professional topics, which is, believe me, very important. And we have to do everything to continue this cooperation and work as well in the future for the protection, for the purpose of protection of our rights, to serve these discussions, these steps, but not only just discussions, but also steps that are usually followed after these discussions towards towards solving of these very pressing and very important issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arman. Garo, your final words?
Oh, if you have nothing to add to that, I will say this. Arman has talked a great deal over the last 5.5 months and the month and a half prior to the 5.5 months. So for 7 months, since the first day of the hostilities, as Arman referred to, from September, and here we are, April 24th. Arman, you've covered dignity, you've covered issues about right to life, you keep talking about right to physical and mental security, mental health, the agony that people have been put through. But I want to say this. From the days of the bloody Sultan of Abdul Hamid in 1896, when a mass murderer, when a genocidal dictator makes a choice and does not suffer consequences, he continues with that choice, and someone then follows in his footsteps and continues with the same choice. That's why we had, after the Hamidian massacres, the Armenian Genocide, and after the Armenian Genocide, we had the Baku pogroms, the Kirovabad pogroms, the Sumgait pogroms. We had the first Artsakh war, the second Artsakh war, and the third Artsakh war. And everything else in between that happened that are too many to mention here, that took place for 106 years. When we talk about genocidal policy being continued, Hrant Dink was murdered in the streets of Turkey because killing Armenians must be okay, you know, as far as the Turkish government is concerned. And it took 15 years for the so-called justice to come, with all sorts of issues in between. We have work to do, but to do the work, as you said, Arman, it's not just Armenian genocide equals Armenians having been killed. It equals dispossession of their lands, their churches, their culture, and to then deny it and to try and change history is yet another form of continuation of the Armenian genocide. It is my hope that we all do everything that we can so that while Sis remains not Armenian today, Shushi becomes Armenian soon, while Hadrut should be Armenian far sooner than Hajan, which has perished. And while Ani sits there in ruins, we do not have churches in Artsakh that are now occupied continue to disappear, like one disappeared recently, and another one is being threatened, the Vankasar church that I've yet to visit. When tomorrow morning comes, our struggle will continue. And yes, we've often talked about RRR, the 3 R's, recognition, restitution, reparations. I'm first and foremost concerned about reunification of those displaced from the lands of Artsakh back to Artsakh, but reunification under blue skies and safe winds and solid ground. And we all can do our part in it. And I hope that we all will continue to do our part in it. But on this day, I want to thank every Armenian organization, every church, every Armenian political party, every advocacy group, every youth organization, every Armenian school, and every Armenian teacher in every school for having kept the dream alive, for having fostered love for humanity instead of hatred and Armenophobia like elsewhere. And for tomorrow, wish everyone Godspeed to continue, because today just is the beginning. A recognition of the Armenian genocide by the greatest power in the world, or a superpower, one of the superpowers of the world at the highest level, means a new beginning. A new beginning means there needs to be continued work ahead. Thank you, Arman. I know that you will continue your work. Thank you, Karnig. I know you will continue yours. I know that my colleagues in the Armenian Bar Association will continue theirs and ours together. And let's see you all in the trenches. Have a good evening. Karnig, I think you have an announcement perhaps for tomorrow.
I do. Yeah, Arman, first, thank you very much again for joining us on this critical day. We appreciate it extremely. I would like to let our viewers know that tomorrow at the same times that we began today, we will be joined by Mr. David Babayan, who is the Foreign Minister of the Republic of Artsakh. He will be joining us to recap the events, the recent events in Artsakh, actually, in particular involving some security issues that had arisen, as well as the announcement by President Biden and related issues. So we hope that you would join us tomorrow at the exact same time. We will be circulating a notice of that to discuss issues with Foreign Minister of Artsakh, David Babayan. And thank you to our viewers. We will be back in 24 hours.